Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Community Engagement Podcast with me, the host, Gary Bison,
and Heather Bragson.
And today we're going to be talking to Connor Joseph, who works for the Royal National Institute of Blind People, or the RNIB for short. Connor, how are you doing? Are you okay?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm good.
Well, thank you very much for spending the time to join us. I know you're very busy, and I know you've actually just finished your work. So thanks very much for spending the time with us. It's most appreciated. Connor, you were one of the organisations that first responded to us wanting to join in with the podcast, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have an institution like yourself want to come in and talk to us. It really is just excellent to have you on board. And we can talk first and foremost just about the organisation in general. How long has the RNIB actually been in existence? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, of course. We recently celebrated our 150th anniversary just within the past couple of years, I believe. So, yeah, been going quite a long time. I think it started off, as far as I'm aware, providing audiobooks and accessible formats for blind and partially sighted people, just so that, there's a way for everyone to access books by listening to them. And that's a service that has continued throughout the organisation's development and journey. So that's something that we still provide today. And yeah, it's kind of snowballed into a huge range of different services that I'm sure we'll come on to nowadays.
150 years, that's one heck of amount of time. Just going on to what you mentioned there, just touching on services. What other services do you offer? I'm aware, obviously, you're talking about the reading books. I see I've had a look through your website. Obviously, there's a heck of a lot of stuff there that, again, I wasn't aware that was on offer. I do actually have an aunt who she's probably only got about 10% of her vision, and I don't think she's ever linked in with the RNIB. From a personal point of view, I'm actually really interested in the services that you do offer. I know you mentioned the talking books for a starter, and we do have an organisation that we're going to be talking to that does the talking newspapers. Mm-hmm. So I'm aware that sort of service is out there and in existence, but they obviously just simply do newspapers, for instance. When you're talking about books, is it really like a library, I guess, that you get access to endless amounts of material, really?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not quite endless, but it's pretty close up there. I think we have close to 40,000 books in our talking book library. So that's purely audio books that people are able to access, and it's a free service, just like your local library. People would get in contact through our helpline or our website, whatever method suitable for them. Usually people would phone up, though, through a helpline. They can talk to our library service about what novels and genres they're interested in, and they can be sent out a range of books to suit their interests. Or alternatively, if they've got a couple of books or authors in mind that they're looking for, they can also find out about those, and we might potentially have them already. So the likes of your big name authors, we tend to have those already. But maybe if there's a book that we don't already have on our system that's up and coming or a fairly new release, and someone would like to have that through ourselves as an audiobook, you can also fundraise to get that created as an audiobook. So it costs £2,500 for that to be produced. So whenever people are keen to fundraise for us, that's usually a good option to offer people as a way to do something and contribute to the organisation. But of course, we have lots of other things that people can do to get involved as well. So yeah, definitely a wide range there. And we do also have some printed materials that we can do. We work with local libraries, so there is called Bookshare, where they're able to access our kind of database, I suppose, and our library team will work with them to get the access so that they can get a large print format as well. So yeah, primarily audiobooks, but there's other options. And yeah, the talking book service is definitely one that a lot of people engage with, and I know we have a number of book groups, across Scotland, across the UK as well, with people who just listen to books purely in audio form.
I think it's interesting that to produce an audiobook, it costs £2,500. That's a heck of a lot of money. I had no idea it would cost so much. Do you know, I'm just looking again through some of the material that you've actually given me here to do a little bit of homework as well. And I know you've got a big section there on the Alexa as well. Now, I've got an Alexa in the house, and I can understand how precious that could be, especially when you get access to talking books, etc. through that. Do you know much about the Alexa yourself, or how to explain to people how to use it to get the best out of it?
Yeah, so I don't personally have one, so I'm not fully clued up. But as far as I'm aware from stuff that we spoke about with colleagues and things, you have different skills on the Alexa that you kind of are almost like apps where you program in what you want it to do. So we worked with Amazon to develop that, where it's kind of built into the Alexa, so you can say to your Alexa to call RNIB. And that'll immediately start calling our main helpline number to get you into any of our services, whether it's through some like team and community connection, whether it's accessing the talking books, or just some general advice about sight loss, really. So that's a great way to access it. And yeah, as you say, people are able to access talking books through Alexa as well. And if anyone needs support on how to do that, they can speak to us through our helpline, because we have designated teams, whether it's Technology for Life or just general advice line people who are able to advise on that kind of technical side of support to give people and get people set up on how to access things. And it's not just Alexa, it could be anything from your accessible TV guide to your iPhone, all that sort of thing. We can help out there.
I've got Alexa, and as you mentioned, there are a number of skills that you can set up on it. To be honest, I've never really used it to its full capacity. So it is something I could actually do. We having a look into myself by as you say, just speaking and saying Alexa, RNIB, and seeing what it comes up with. I should actually be careful when I'm saying that in case my device actually picks that up and starts talking in the background. Yeah, they're fantastic bits of kit. Certainly there's so much on them, and I can understand how they would be, it could almost be essential to a lot of people that have sight issues. I notice as well that you've got a radio channel as well. Tune into Europe's first radio station for the blind and partially sighted listeners that is working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That, again, I had no idea about. Something I should be checking out, and I should certainly be mentioning even to my aunt, because she certainly won't be aware. And I know she listens to the radio quite a bit. The only unfortunate thing about having an Alexa is that you obviously need broadband, and that's something that she doesn't have in the house. And it's a real shame, because I can see how much value would be in that for her. Where are you actually based? You do have your head office in Edinburgh, but you're obviously based throughout the country as well. How does that actually operate?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we've got we do have some office space within Edinburgh that we're able to work out of, and in addition to that, we've got a community cafe in Edinburgh that people are, it's open to the public, so you don't even need to be using our services. You can just come in and access the cafe and kind of support us that way. But it is a nice social space that we have for blind and partially sighted people to come along and have some lunch and chat to other folks. Or sometimes there's groups and activities in the cafe as well, like the Domino's group meet there. As for kind of beyond that area, so like myself, I cover the west of Scotland, so the rest of the team will typically be out and about, so we will visit any social groups that we're looking to set up. I'm doing a lot of kind of partnership work where I'll visit other sight loss charities and other partners within the third sector. So that might be your Diabetes UK, your Age UK, that sort of thing. People who will be affected by some sort of other issue, but coincidentally also affects their sight. So we do a lot of work in travelling around like that, but primarily based from home to kind of do the other, the admin side, the boring side of the job as well, where we kind of need to log calls and do all of our admin. We'll be based from home. So as I say, I also cover Ayrshire, so I'm kind of based in Ayrshire. And yeah, if there's any events or that in that area, I'll be along to those as well.
Again, we mentioned, it's obviously a big organisation. Do you know how many actually employed staff you've got? Because I know actually you've got a lot of volunteers as well.
Yeah, I'd need to double check the number of volunteers, but in terms of staff, I believe there's about 1,200, 1,300 staff, and that goes for across the whole of the UK. And there are, a good amount of staff based in Scotland, although They might also be in teams which are UK-wide teams. So say, for example, our social media and marketing team, there might be people all across the UK, because I know there's some of them in Scotland, for example, but they're not necessarily working on Scotland projects or communities, that sort of thing. So yeah, as a UK-wide organisation, about 1,300 staff, probably a couple hundred or so within Scotland, but it is just considerably smaller compared to that larger figure. We do try and have meetups every year or every other year when we can, and if there's any community events that we set up, we'll try and invite other people, other staff members and colleagues along, which is nice. And yeah, we do have a lot of volunteers that come to us, typically within specific teams though. So like myself and a community facing team, we have like Technology for Life as well, which will recruit roaming volunteers. So that's why I'm kind of not too sure about the numbers for Scotland specifically, because there is quite a few different teams who operate and require volunteers.
Again, as far as actually accessing to the organisation itself, obviously you aren't open 24/7, but you do have a support line, don't you? A helpline.
Yeah, that's right. So the helpline is open most days, I would say. I believe it's 7 days and with a reduced service at the weekends or certainly a Sunday. And that's open for anyone of the general public just to get in touch with us and get any support that they're looking for. I say it's open to anyone because, a friend or a family or a carer, anyone that's maybe in contact with someone with sight loss could phone up that number and make a referral or speak and get advice on behalf of someone else. Likewise, if it's maybe a local organisation who have got someone that has came to them, they're not really sure how to support them with their sight loss, then again, they could get in touch with us to get that sort of information. But yeah, more broadly, if someone is blind or partially sighted and they want help with maybe hearing about the latest products or learning what local community groups are near them, they would phone up that number. It just works as a directory service, so even if you're not sure where to go or what service you're looking for, you can get in touch with someone and they'll eventually put you through to the relevant person, whether it's passed down the line to myself or whoever's appropriate for that. Within my role in the Community Connection team, I work 5 days a week. I'm full-time employed with the organisation, and within that I try and run groups and support groups across Glasgow and Ayrshire. So it's quite a big challenge to try and balance all of that. And as I say, I've got colleagues who do the same kind of thing on the east of Scotland as well. But we do a lot of partnership working, so maybe if an area already is quite well served and already maybe has a community group that's independent, we will look to support that and help kind of promote it and that sort of thing, make referrals into it rather than us taking the lead on fully running the group if it's not needed. So plenty of ways to kind of reach us and for me to kind of reach out and get you where you need to be, essentially.
And not just you being hands-on, obviously people can go into, like I said, Google, for instance, and they can find your website. And it's a fantastic website. It's well laid out. There's lots of great information on it from what I've seen. Do you use Facebook as well?
Yep. So I'm glad you kind of picked up with that on our website, because it did just get redesigned over the past year to make it a bit easier to use and more accessible. Yeah. And that was done in conjunction with our community members as well, people that use magnifiers on their laptops or screen readers, that sort of thing. So yeah, we do try and be as accessible as possible and take the lead in that stuff. But yeah, we are also on social media with regards to we have a couple of different channels. So there'll be the main RNIB social medias on the likes of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, that sort of thing. And that'll be the overall news from the organisation, what we're doing as a whole, what campaigns we're working on, all of that stuff. But then we also have national channels. So we have RNIB Scotland, which will have a smaller following, but we also post up more local events that we've been working on or local campaigns. So I know we recently did the street credibility campaign that the Scotland team had worked on. And as I mentioned, we post up any local community events as well. So if you're interested in a particular thing in your area, then that's where you can kind of find out about that as well. And then the other thing to mention is if you are on Facebook, we have a Facebook group called RNIB Connect Scotland, or RNIB Scotland Connect, I forget which way around it is, but you put those combination of words in, you find the group, and it's open for anyone across Scotland who's blind or partially sighted, and again also friends and families. And it's a community-led group, so people are open and able to share their experiences, or maybe share, hey, there's this group that I've went to that's, you know, a sport that's been quite inclusive and I've enjoyed, maybe you should go along to it, that type of thing. And it's, yeah, just a great resource for people to share experiences and what they're going through. And then us as a community team will often post up local events and activities in there, and we can kind of get feedback from people in terms of the activities that they're looking for.
Most organisations will have the website, and a lot of them do have fantastic information on them, but Facebook seems to get used by a heck of a lot of them simply for the more upcoming events or meetings or whatever's going on. It just seems to be something that goes hand in hand with the web page, that it works actually linking into the two of them. And I find with a lot of organisations that their web page seems to be pretty out of date, unfortunately, you know, because it's harder to keep them up to date. Whereas Facebook, it's so easy to just put that information on and upload it even on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, it's something, again, listening to you is just re-emphasising what I was thinking, that there's a heck of a lot more probably on your Facebook page than there would be on your webpage, for instance. So definitely important to have a look at the Facebook page and link in with that. And it's something, again, for anyone that's listening that's interested in your Facebook pages, what I'll get you to do is to give me that information and put it up at the end of the podcast, so it's there for people to find easily. Talking about you yourself then, you've already told us your position in the organisation and touched on what you do. How long have you actually worked at the RNIB now?
Yeah, I think it's about 18 months now. So it was just the end of 2021 when I became fully employed with the organisation. But prior to that, I was also working as a volunteer. So I was already quite familiar with people in the community connection team, like my manager and some of my colleagues now, working with them as a volunteer. Over the pandemic, we did a lot of phone call groups and phone conferencing systems that we had. So that was quite useful because there wasn't a huge amount of other organisations in the sight loss sector who could really provide that, just down to kind of our size and the amount of funding that we have, that sort of thing, the reach that we have. So we were quite fortunate that we were able to provide that service, but it was quite volunteer-led, so I would kind of coordinate the discussions on those groups, and then I would also support the Facebook group that I just mentioned with regards to getting discussions going on there as well, and just making sure that everyone was quite well engaged and chatting away, especially when everyone wasn't really able to get out and there wasn't a lot of activities going on. And then once stuff started kind of opening up a bit, I kind of got more involved in the campaigning side of volunteering as well. So that was when we started doing our accessible gaming campaign. One of my colleagues has started up a community group for visually impaired gamers, so I was interested in that and got involved, and that kind of snowballed into wanting to work with companies and doing campaignings. Now we have a huge campaign and staff who are just dedicated to doing that now, based off of what essentially started as a community group. So it's really good to see how stuff like that has developed over time. And yeah, I'm just now fully employed, almost 2 years, trying to develop the same kind of stuff, get community groups up and running in the west of Scotland in terms of listening to people and what it is that they're looking for, and, you know, looking to deliver that based off of that feedback, I suppose.
So what actually got you into volunteering? Because it's, you know, there's a lot of people that they never think about taking up a volunteering role. Was it something you were doing when you were at college or university, or was it something you actively looked at or just fell into?
Yeah, I think it was probably a mixture of all of those things, a combination of them all. I did a university degree and graduated in 2019. It was in film and media. So I was initially off the back of graduating, looking for employment and looking for opportunities to develop experience and skills, network, build connections, all of that sort of thing. and I am visually impaired myself. So I was looking at and had been suggested to look at volunteer roles with RNIB because there was one that came up which was purely doing social media activities. So it was to work with someone who would be going to events, and you would basically support with the promotion of the activities and the reporting of them on social media. As it kind of happened, that person went on leave for a wee while, and then there was COVID, so that kind of slowed everything down, not just for myself, but for everybody. So that kind of got put on hold. But yeah, I finally got up and running, and getting involved with the volunteering did help to kind of build up my experience and build up confidence speaking to other people and developing like active listening skills, which is like really important in my role now when I am speaking to other people and listening to their experiences, building up empathy as well in terms of, hey, this is something that's affected me, kind of understand what you're going through, that sort of thing. So it was kind of a mixture of looking for employment, looking for developing my skills, but also something that impacted me personally and something that I could kind of relate to and help other people with as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you've mentioned there that you've got a visual impairment yourself. I know I've spoke to you on a couple of occasions now prior to trying to do the podcast, and I think that's the first time you've actually mentioned that you had a visual impairment. I'm curious actually, just if you've got that visual impairment yourself, what sort of help you need to actually carry out your job? For instance, is there anything special in particular that you need to carry out your job to help you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I suppose it's similar to other people. I suppose it's not really something that I would, mention or bring up like an online setting, like when we've spoke before, because it's not really been relevant, I guess. It's not until you start doing my role and you're going to these different community groups and telling people about it, and you start sharing your experiences, and then they kind of have that greater trust almost and greater relationship to you, even though it's like the first time you're meeting. They're like, oh, the fact that you're going through and you kind of understand a wee bit of what I'm going through as well really helps bring people out and communicate. So there's that element. But yeah, in terms of work, I use magnification software. So there's a software called Zoom Text. I know there's kind of default built-in software you can use as well, but Zoom Text is the one that I kind of prefer and find the most useful and most effective. Basically, it just gives you some features to magnify the entirety of your desktop or laptop screen. And I don't think I'd be able to kind of do any work without that, because without that I can't really see any elements of the screen. I know for other people they might use things like screen readers, VoiceOver. There's one called JAWS that's quite well known. It's kind of associated and you can access through Access to Work or your employer providing that. So I didn't have to go through Access to Work, but RNIB kind of provide us with equipment like laptops and work phones. So they were able to arrange having the software already installed. And then, for like my work phone, for example, I'll use an iPhone, and iPhones are great for accessibility settings, whether it's just making the font larger or bolder, higher contrast. I've got Zoom on there as well. So lots of different things that I can use to navigate technology really. But in terms of getting out and about, I'm totally fine. So I usually just rely on technology to, look at apps for when trains are due and that sort of thing.
You yourself are partially sighted. I'm assuming that you don't have a driving license. So if you have to go out into the community and meet various people and organisations, groups, etc., how do you manage?
That's totally right. I'm not able to drive, along with many other blind people. I believe it's if you aren't able to read kind of halfway down the optician's chart, then you're not able to get a driver's license. So yeah, that kind of cuts off a lot of people and makes life quite challenging for both, carrying out this role and, being someone with partial sight. So essentially, I rely on public transport along with a lot of other blind people. And you're able to go and get a travel card. So if you're registered with a visual impairment, you can apply for a travel card with a little eye symbol, and that will allow you to access bus travel and train travel for free. And then you can also get a card through application that will have a C along with the I symbol. So that'll get you and a companion on bus travel for free, and also a discount on rail travel, but that's based on your local authority. And that's really key in terms of like getting, in and out of Glasgow, whether it's, going from one side of the city to the other for a group, or maybe I'm like going from Ayrshire, where I live, over to like our Edinburgh offices, for example, which will be multiple trains. So yeah, it's great for that. I just go up to the barrier and scan it through. There's no issues. It's nice and easy to use. And the only issue is when it doesn't work and the barrier doesn't open, you need to find a member of staff to let you through. But yeah, I know other people within kind of our team who maybe use mobility aids like canes and guide dogs and that sort of thing. So maybe they might have to book assistance, and a lot of the staff at like train stations, for example, will be really helpful at giving assistance if you booked it in. But me myself, I'm fine getting out and about and being mobile. It's just a case of hopping on public transport. But yeah, it definitely does add to the kind of the workload for the job. If you've got a full day of events to travel back and forward to, then it's very, very tiring at the end of the week when you have to rely on a couple of different hours worth of train travel and buses and transfers and all that sort of thing. Definitely makes the day a lot longer. But hey, at least I don't have a car to pay for, so that's a good point at least.
That is true. So just when you're getting about, you don't have a companion that travels with you, do you? No.
No, I'm fine
No.
getting about. If I've got, say, like a group or an event, maybe I've got like a volunteer that I'm meeting up with who's also coming along to the event or the group, then potentially I'll meet up with them at somewhere, central, and then travel out to it. But that's more just, convenience in terms of meeting and working with people on a regular basis to do that. But, if I'm just going to something myself, I'm quite happy to get out and about myself.
Well, it certainly doesn't appear to have held you back in any size, shape, or form. You've been to university, you've got your degree, you're in employment, you obviously enjoy what you do as well. So it's fantastic that, you've got to the point that you are just now, and who knows what the future holds for you. What do you enjoy about your job the most? Because you do seem to really enjoy it from what I've spoke to you.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I suppose probably that campaigning element I started when I was volunteering, coming into this role, although we do a lot of the community and the social aspects of bringing people together, we do also have an element of the role where we have to raise awareness of our services, just like, being on this podcast, but also raising awareness of sight loss and carrying out and delivering sessions to like organizations and businesses. Probably, a smaller portion of the role, like, 30% of the role or something, but it's probably one of the main parts that I enjoy because you're able to interface with maybe general public members and staff that wouldn't usually often connect with someone with a visual impairment. So being able to go along and deliver those sessions is really enjoyable. Just discussing about how to support people. It's usually quite a fun experience as well. We'll often do some practical exercises, whether that's like using a blindfold or some simulation glasses, which simulate different eye conditions. But we always preface that by saying that it's, it doesn't quite compare to having lived experience. It's just to give that initial bit of insight, really. And we always have staff members delivering the sessions or having a volunteer along with us to get the discussion going as well. But certainly any aspects of kind of campaigning or awareness raising is something that I really enjoy, and I would love to do more of, or move into that area, maybe like 10 years in the future or something, get into the campaigns team. But yeah, that's definitely something I've enjoyed doing the most so far.
That's good. Again, you've got a goal there for the future. You know what you want to do, and I'm sure you'll get there sooner or later. Funding is obviously a massive part to any sort of charitable organisation, and I know you touched on the fact that you've got the cafe through in Edinburgh that anyone can access. You don't have to be visually impaired to go in and use it. And as you mentioned, buying a cup of tea or a cake or whatever it may be, you're not only get the aspect of meeting new people, for instance, and chatting and engaging with others, but you're also putting money in the till, which can be used to pay for people like yourself in the role that you carry out. And you obviously, the organisation needs paid employees. It's a massive organisation, obviously. It can't exist in just volunteers alone. Do you know just exactly other sort of streams of revenue that come in to the RNIB to keep it afloat, where that money comes from? For instance, do you get lottery funding, or is there other streams that you're aware of?
Yeah, of course. I can touch on that briefly. So we have, to be honest, we have a huge amount of different streams for fundraising that comes into us. As far as I'm aware, one of the main streams is actually in legacy donations. So when people leave a donation in their will after they've, sadly passed away, and that might be, someone that's used the service for quite a wee while and they want to kind of give back to us, so they're able to leave us a donation in their will. That's actually one of the largest sources of funding that we receive. But yeah, as you mentioned, we have funding from lottery, People's Postcode Lottery. We've done a lot of work with them, particularly in Scotland over the past year. So they'll, might give us some bit of funding, and then we'll do some work with them, like giving them staff volunteering opportunities, for example. So in a situation like that, we do tend to have a bit of a partnership going on, so we're both getting something out of it. And then there's also lots of opportunities for either general public or volunteers to get involved as well. So, for example, in Scotland, we have the Kilt Walks, 4 Kilt Walks across Scotland: Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee and Aberdeen. And people can get involved in those, and we have like a team that you can sign up to when you're signing up to take part in a kilt walk, and you can join like Team RNIB. So any fundraising that you do will go straight to us on our pages and that sort of thing. So that's a great way to do it. You could always just do, your own independent thing as well. We'll often get donations from like Rotary clubs or just an independent person who wishes to maybe fundraise because their parent has used our services and would like to kind of give back in thanks for that. So yeah, there's a huge range of different ways that we kind of get funding sources. But yeah, to kind of put it into perspective for us as an organisation, I suppose the Community Connection team that I'm in, there's 50 members of staff across the whole of the UK within this service, and our kind of combined value within the organisation is something like 1.7 million, and that's just for our one team to be funded. So yeah, there's a lot of other people, 1,200 people in the organisation that all need employed as well. So we do have a lot of different funding sources, and we have like business services as well. So it's not quite fundraising, but we get income generated through working with businesses, providing them with like accessible documents, for example, or looking at how to make their materials more accessible, and that sort of thing. So yeah, we do have lots of different methods for generating income.
I can understand that the majority or a lot of your funding comes through people that have used the service before. They've obviously got an understanding of how important it is, and yeah, leaving money in wills. I've seen that happen in many businesses, different businesses, organisations as well. So yeah, okay. You've been a volunteer then for a while. And when you started doing the role that you were doing as a volunteer, was there much in the way of training that you got to help you get started within that role?
Yeah, there was a reasonable amount of training in terms of, I suppose, etiquette, in terms of how to approach people with sight loss who've got a visual impairment, and kind of training around RNIB's ideals and policies and that sort of thing. It has kind of developed a bit further since then as well. So since I've kind of been in this role and employed, our central volunteering team have kind of developed the training process to make it a little bit easier for people to understand. So now if you wish to volunteer with us, it's kind of 3 workbooks you go through and read, and then at the end of that there's also a safeguarding assessment. So depending upon what role you're doing, you'll typically have to do a level of safeguarding to ensure that you're kind of competent in your role, especially if it's a face-to-face role supporting like a social group in your area. We'll definitely be keen for everybody to be, well up on their safeguarding, and you typically have to go through the PVG or Disclosure Scotland kind of criminal record check process as well. to give you that protection for ensuring you know how to kind of deal with any issues that may occur when supporting vulnerable adults. But we do also have kind of our central volunteering team have other roles that may be more occasional, maybe like helping out here and there at events, or we have volunteers who will do like digital technology accessibility tests, or like ATM accessibility tests, that sort of thing, that just help out here and there. So the kind of training for that is more around RNIB's policies and ideals, and less about safeguarding, because you're not really dealing with people in those instances. But certainly with, you know, in my team working with communities, we do have a fairly vigorous process with regards to making sure you're fairly clued up and confident in terms of what's expected of you.
There's obviously a lot of different roles there in volunteering. So it's a real good opportunity for someone to actually not just gain knowledge and experience, but potentially, as you've done, get into employment with the organisation itself. And I think it's so important these days that anyone that's even of a school age that starts to look at volunteer opportunities, good for the CVs. It's great to get that experience in the social skills, and you know, massive part for you and your role is the communication skills, which can be quite lacking these days. So yeah, volunteering, as far as I'm concerned, is so important, and it would be a great thing for everyone to do. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to do these podcasts as well, is to try and put that point out there that volunteering is not great just for the organisation itself, and all organisations need those volunteers to actually operate, but it's great for the individual as well, and for that person's future, to gain employment and just be nice to everyone, and yeah, the whole world would be so much better if we could all help each other out just a little bit. Yeah, well, that brings us on, Connor, to the last section of the podcast, which I'm going to pass over to my daughter, Heather, who's going to join me and is going to ask you some questions just about volunteering itself.
So we're going to look at volunteering now. So are you looking for any volunteers at present?
Yeah, absolutely. We're always looking for volunteers as an organisation. So I mentioned it a wee bit there, but there's a huge amount of different opportunities that people can do. So if it's something quite broad, I suppose, or you're not quite sure what you're looking for, we have a central volunteering team who can kind of talk you through some of the, you know, general roles that we have available. And then within my role in the community connection team, I'd be looking for people who are quite enthusiastic in terms of working with communities, especially people that are maybe a bit underserved in the community. So, you know, blind and partially sighted people who it's quite difficult to formulate groups sometimes when there's no promotion method other than word of mouth a lot of the time. So having a volunteer that's keen to, you know, really get involved in our activities and support them would be excellent. And that's like a community lead volunteer, or a community volunteer. We refer to them as they're really central, and they're working within the community itself to support those activities.
How old do your volunteers need to be?
We look for volunteers that are aged 18 and over, and we do have we are potentially able to work with people who are over 16 if, you know, we go through a process and have parental consent and that sort of thing. But for the main, we would look for 18 and over.
Okay. What would you expect from a volunteer?
I touched on it a wee bit. We'd really expect people to be very much enthusiastic about the role, and in terms of engaging with us as an organisation, and having a set commitment. I know a lot of times when people are looking at volunteer opportunities or looking around at what's available, they'll often say, oh, well, I can only spare, you know, an hour a month or that sort of thing. So we would be looking for, a reasonable amount of commitment from people to be enthusiastic about helping out a vulnerable community group who are, you know, really keen once they kind of get going for activities and looking to potentially take the lead on some groups as well. And someone who would also be keen for getting information out there. So as I mentioned, it's not necessarily just supporting community groups. I'm doing lots of work just now to try and get involved with Glasgow libraries, for example. So maybe having volunteers stationed across Glasgow to provide information about RNIB services. So the expectation would be someone with a lot of enthusiasm, to sum that up.
What benefits can volunteers bring to the organisation?
Volunteers can bring a lot of different benefits. So whether it's looking for volunteers with lived experience, we have a lot of our volunteers who are blind or partially sighted themselves. So bringing that lived experience to community groups when we're starting up, as I was talking about earlier, it gives people who are new to the group that point of contact where they are more kind of easily and willing to share their experiences and build up relationships, because they can see, oh, well, this group's already being led by a volunteer who is blind themselves, so it's easier for them to get into the group. And then also as a whole, even if they're not blind or partially sighted themselves, just the benefit of having lots of different experiences really strengthens us as an organisation, because we're really keen to be led by the community in terms of what it is that people are looking for and listening and acting upon that.
If anyone wants to get in touch to volunteer, how can they get in touch?
If it is in a local area, so if you're in my particular area, you would get through to myself, but ideally you're going to want to go through the team mailbox that we have, which is Scotland Community Connection at rnib.org.uk. And I'll also give Gary out the details as well, so you can promote it. Or alternatively, you can contact our helpline, which I mentioned earlier, and speak to the central volunteering team about opportunities, or to be passed over to ourselves. So the helpline number is 0303 123 9999. So either method will get you through to ourselves and we can discuss that. Or if you want to go through the website as well and kind of look at things at your leisure, then there's lots of information on there, along with a form that you can fill in to note your interest as well.
Now, last question. What do you think it is that motivates volunteers?
I think probably the thing that motivates volunteers, it'll be similar to myself, and it's really not necessarily about employment, but just really getting out there and chatting to other people with the same experiences as yourself, particularly if you've got lived experience. But I suppose for people that are maybe general public and don't have any connection with someone who's blind or partially sighted, it's also just giving care and kind of support to other people who are in that particular situation. So yeah, particularly with our sector, the kind of social care almost sector, it's the motivation that people want to care and support other people in their local community and really build up that community feeling.
Connor, that brings us to the end of the podcast. I just want to say a big, massive thank you again for joining us. You've given us some brilliant information there. Again, you mentioned a couple of things like phone numbers, email addresses, websites. That information will appear at the end of the podcast, so anyone that's wanting that information will be able to see it on the screen very shortly. We just hope you enjoy listening to the podcast yourselves. If you enjoyed it and you want to leave comments, you can subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. Just want to thank you very much for listening, and Connor, thank you very much for your time.
No worries, thanks for having me.
Well, that's it until next time.
From me, Heather Bryson.
And me, Gary Bryson.
Bye.